Okay, so here's just a quick video on really basic spreadsheet syntax review, which you may not need because we did the complex value spreadsheet, but in case you would like sort of a bare basics review, I'm just going to go through the spreadsheet hints on this document here. This was the one-page handout where we did the expected value, or the expected value problem, and I have these spreadsheet hints, so I'm just going to go through those one by one. So where I'm going to go is I'm just going to go in the same spreadsheet where I created the expected value example. I'm going to create a new sheet in there. I'm going to just call it hints. All right, so this first bullet just says in a cell you can either enter data. So by entering data, you just type numbers in there. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's what I mean by typing data into a cell. There's two other things you can do in a cell too. One is a formula. Let's say I wanted in this cell to add A2 and A3. I do that, and actually this goes to the second bullet on that sheet, which says to enter a formula or a function, start your entry with an equal sign. So if I do equal sign, that means I want to put a formula or a function in there. And then if I want to add these up, I can just say A2 plus, and then I'm highlighting my cursor over to what I want to add up. And so I have a formula in the cell now. The result of that formula is 11, but the variables, if you will, are A2, which is A is the column letter and 2 is the row number, so A2 means the value in that column, A3 means the value in that column, and so this formula here is A2 plus A3. And then there's also functions in Excel. I also access those by hitting the equal sign, and this sheet has a couple of the functions, but you can always hit this little F of X button right here, insert function, to get a list of what all the different functions are. And you can see that there's commonly used ones, so you can see all the kinds of things you can do in a spreadsheet: sum, average, count. But there's all kinds of different ones here: database, lookup, reference, all. When I look at all, you can see there's probably 100 different functions here. I'm going to go back to commonly used because sum is a commonly used one, so I'm going to go ahead and just pick that. Say OK, and it actually gives you the syntax here too. So equals sum, and then I can just list numbers that I want to add up, separated by commas. Or I can just highlight a whole range. So in this case, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to click my cursor on this range, and you can see what it's done is it's selected the range A2, and that colon means almost kind of like a matrix notation. Go all the way through this ending point, which is A6. And so then I close that parenthesis, and it's just going to add those numbers up for me. And I think in this spreadsheet, that's the only function you're probably going to want to use. Although, actually, combination and permutation, but we'll talk about that in a second. The third bullet talks about referencing cells. To reference a cell in another formula, the way you do that, it's like a variable name, and I think I just talked about this. You reference those cells based on their position, their row and column position in your spreadsheet. So if I want to grab the value that's in cell A5, I don't type 8, I'd say equals A5, and the spreadsheet knows that I mean to tell me the value there. And if I go ahead and change that number, look, if I make a 12 here, it'll change the reference over here because that value is linked to that variable, that data entry point. Notice how the sum also changed when I did that too. That's one of the nice things about spreadsheets is it updates everything if you program them the right way. The fourth bullet is if you copy a formula down and it contains cell references, those formulas maintain a constant relative reference. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a column here to show you what I mean by that. So in column B here, if I take equals A2 and multiply it by 3, that means take the number in A2 and multiply it by 3, so that'll be 15. And let's see what happens when I copy this down. If I copy it down to these spots here, notice how if I look in this cell, it says equals A3 and multiply it by 3. So spreadsheets make the assumption that when you copy formulas, you want the relative position to stay the same. So this one, another way to read this is take the cell 1 to my left and multiply by 3. So when I copy that down, that's what it's going to do in all these different cells. Here it means take the cell 1 to my left, multiply by 3, which in this case is A6. So that's often what you want to do. In the complex number spreadsheet, we saw that if we didn't want that relative relative positioning thing to happen, you'd have to put these dollar signs around the letter. I don't think you're going to need that in this for this project, but just to remind you what that was all about. Now when I copy that down, notice how it fixes the cell reference at A2. So when I copy down here, it stays A2, it stays A2, stays A2, stays A2. Like I said, I don't think you're going to need that for this lottery spreadsheet, but you may. You might find a way to want to use that functionality. So I'll just go ahead and change this back to A2 times 3. Copy that down with the relative cell references. Fifth bullet is talking about sum, which sum is a function that adds values up. I already talked about that. I'm not going to talk about it here, but just to remind you that's what that function looks like. Put the equal sign, sum, and highlight the range that you want to add up. The other way you can use the sum function is, let's say I wanted to just add up the numbers in rows 2 and 3 and 5 and 6 and wanted to skip that 7. You could still use the sum function to do that. But in this case, all I have to do is highlight those two cells and then separate the things I want to add by commas. Put a comma, highlight those two cells, close my parenthesis, and now it's going to add up everything except that middle number. Just to give you a little more detail on how that sum function can work. Basic operations, you need to be able to add, multiply, divide, and exponentiate. So the sixth column or sixth bullet here says when you want to multiply, the plus in adding and subtracting is pretty clear. You just put a plus sign and a minus sign for that. For multiplication, in case it wasn't clear, you don't use the X, you use an asterisk. So if I want to multiply cell A5 and B5, I put an asterisk in between and that will multiply them. So that gave me 192. If I want to divide, I use the slash sign. So I'll change this one to be a divide here. So equals, take the number in B6, divide by the number in A6. Took 27 divided by 9, that's 3. And then exponentiation, you use the caret symbol, which is the, looks like that. And so if I wanted to take 3, or this value in cell C6 raised to the fifth power, this is how I would do that notation. So that gives me 243. And then the last thing is just to go through, for the lottery spreadsheet, you might want to use combinations and permutation functions. So let's say I had a cell, let's say I wanted to do 10 items. Put this in here, and I want to choose 4. And I want to do a combination version where order is not important. And I want to do a permutation version where order is important. I'm just writing these so you can see the documentation here. This is a function, so I could do equals. And then I show in the 7th and 8th bullet that the function notation is combin. And starting, you can see here's the first one, combin, left paren. And then it tells you the syntax here. Take the number, comma, the number chosen. So in this case, rather than just type the numbers in, I'm going to use the cell reference here. Take the number of items, comma, the number chosen. That's an A12. And that's going to be, that's basically 10C4 right there. And if I want to do permutations, it's equal permute is the syntax. And the same thing here. Pick the number of items, the number that I'm choosing. So there's 5,040 ways to choose 4 items out of a group of 10. And what's nice about the spreadsheet, again, if I want to switch this around, if let's say I meant to have 9 items and choose 3, I just change my input values and it goes ahead and changes gives me 9C3 and 9P3 easily. If I choose 1, those should just default both to 9. That's what we expect. If we have 0 there, we get 1. So this is acting the way we're expecting it. If we had 72 items, for example, the number of balls in the lottery, you'd have some big numbers here, but you get the idea. So those are functions you might want to use, and I will end the video here.